Hello. Hello, everybody. I know it's been a long time, but I hope you're all well in this mad world. And yeah, just wanted to do a little live stream. And I already put up about a week ago just a rerun of the audio recording that I did for the first podcast that was on the great new ClearAirFM online radio channel that's been started by Darren, the guy who began the Light newspaper. So hi, Redbecks. I thought we'd do another going through the second podcast, but I'm just going to do it do the live stream and read it out from here with a few little images, and we can maybe have a little chat as well afterwards about what everyone thinks. Hi, Green Tea, good to see you. And yeah, if anyone wants to make any comments on the chat, and also can just have a little run through what we've been doing in the last few months when we've abandoned you and left you cast adrift into the void without any crafty nihilist live streams to keep you company. But so just to get into it, this was a podcast entitled False Flags. And I'm going to be talking about false flags, pirates, Templars, and the deception and abuses of power, which are continuing, of course, to this day. So you have to excuse me as I just find where my blooming cursor is so I can move this down a bit. So I spoke in my first podcast about flags and how these have been used as symbols to draw people into conflict, and how they're being used now to divide the population. But a term I didn't use was false flag, which is another very strong use of the word flag, and it's a very important thing symbolically in where we are in our society. And false flag operations, basically anything that's covert in the modern parlance, anything that is covert, conducted by governments, could be corporations, any other organizations, these shadowy background individuals, and they look like they're carried out by other entities, whether it's other countries or whether it may be a terrorist group that's alleged to have carried something out. And it's all about deceiving the public and raising public support for whatever their agenda is. And this quote on this image that I pulled out from the internet, attributed to David Rockefeller: "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order." We all know this term in the truth community. Bit hesitant using the word truth community because sadly people are ripping themselves apart in the so-called truth community, and it's probably caused a lot by the powers that shouldn't be, this divisions, but it doesn't really help us trying to fight the powerful when we're divided ourselves. But basically anyone who's researched, listened to a podcast, watched a YouTube video, read a book about something that's termed in the mainstream as a conspiracy theory, you know the words false flag. But it's interesting to go back to the origin of the term, and it's back to a time when sailing ships used to display flags and just to designate what their nationality was, what allegiance they were in, who was what side they were fighting on, basically. And of course, flags can also be used for many other signs within. There was a whole language basically around flags. within navies and shipping for many years. But the origin as well of the false flag, a ship could display the flag of their enemy to allow them to get close to that other ship, to the enemy, before attacking them. Looking this up on the internet, apparently since at least the 16th century, I guess it could have been long before that, this was something that was used often for an advantage to be gained in war. Hi, Whispering. Hi, DJ. And it's associated as well with pirate ships. And the classic flag that the pirates used to display, of course, is the skull and crossbones. Now, as I'm sort of going around the symbology of flags, it's very interesting to me that there's been a lot of comparisons made with the Knights Templar and pirates, and a lot of that is around this use of the skull and crossbones, known as the Jolly Roger flag, because the Knights Templar themselves were alleged to have rituals and to pay homage, to worship almost decapitated heads, whether that be of a saint or some revered figure, and also very important relics of saints, bones, body parts, basically. I've discussed this kind of thing in other live streams on this channel, which people will have seen. And as I've talked before, I think a lot of these things go right back to the Neolithic times, when obviously, as has been found in long barrows and things like that, when there's bones, remnants of people that were entombed there. And this idea, Maria Wheatley's talked about how probably significant women at the time of the Neolithic era were regarded as divisible, in that their parts were not entombed in terms of a single body, but they were kept sometimes for years, and different parts of the body were put in around different parts of the landscape to maybe inscribe it or give some power to it or something like that. And even the bones were ground down into powder and put into grooves in drinking vessels and things like that. So possibly stemming from that, there's this reverence for human remains in different forms. But yeah, this link between skulls and bones and the symbology that goes into the flag, which was associated with pirates. Some researchers have argued that many pirates were Templars. Obviously, when the Templars were supposedly disbanded and they became out of favor, and the Pope at the time and the French king, probably because the Templars were gaining too much power, they had this huge sort of pogrom against them. The leaders were burnt at the stake. A lot of their wealth was taken. But there's been much talk that they had a huge fleet of ships, and that a lot of the ships were unaccounted for after this breaking up of the Templars officially. And there's a lot of uncertainty as to where a lot of the ships went, although a lot of people think they were just sunk or taken in by other forces. But potentially some of these Templars could have gone to a different part of the world, maybe over to the Americas, and maybe they were, them or their descendants were some of the pirates that became notorious, particularly in the sort of around the 18th century, which is sort of supposed to be the golden age of pirates, as it's often thought about in our modern sensibilities anyway. But you've got an interesting link there with piracy on the seas. Also, Templars were known to be one of the beginners of what's now our modern banking system, as they used their network of properties, all their different connections. Beginning around the Crusades, they allowed pilgrims to deposit funds at one Templar location, and then they had sort of coded documents that will then the person, the pilgrim, could then take to another Templar place in a different country, and were able to exchange it for gold or whatever it may be, other kind of valuables. They could store valuables in one place of the Templars, if you like, bank it there. And also then, because of this, the great wealth that the Templars had and other people storing their money with them, they then started to facilitate making loans to people. So again, you've got the starts, this early banking system. And again, many people think that although the Templars were officially disbanded centuries ago in 1312, and following all those mass arrests, there were torture and execution of leading Templars by the King of France in 1307. But there are theories that the Templars may have spread to the New World of the Americas long before their supposed discovery by Columbus. Perhaps they had settlements there, and as I say, that they could have been part of this heyday of piracy in the Caribbean in the early 18th century. Green Tea mentioned about Templars making personal vows of poverty. Yes, that was all part of the Templar organization, but well, certainly the Templars as an institution, if you like, had enormous wealth. But you're right, at least in theory, the individuals used to give a vow of poverty, I think celibacy as well, and it was all about dedication to Christ, to furthering Christianity and all those things. And probably the rank and file maybe weren't individually wealthy, but I'm sure many of them did become so. But I think like a lot of things, this was just a smokescreen, and these vows of poverty, the Templars weren't what they seemed. And of course, there's still a debate. A lot of people see them as fighting the good fight, and that they were partly, I suppose, the fact that they were persecuted, as I say, by the French king in the 1300s and the Pope at the time, and then they were seen as like rebelling against the establishment. But were they just forming the counter-establishment? And then, of course, if you think over the centuries, even if there were some noble aims at certain stages of the Templars' creation, and throughout it, there may have been people with noble aims in how they wanted to use the power. But we know again about the corruption that power can bring, and even if some have good intentions, many more won't, or they'll be corrupted by the fact that they've got huge power and wealth, and that will go to their heads, and they will start to think that they can use it to control things for the way they want. Yeah, good point, DJ. Banking can be split up the words into ban and king. Yeah, ban a king's power. Interesting idea. But yeah, Green Tea, it's like today's banking. The guys at the top will obviously benefit, and they've got all this shady subterfuge that's behind banking and how it manipulates society and everything. DJ said perhaps Columbus was given a Templar map of the New World. There are rumours, and yes, there's lots of interesting rumours around that. So lots of theories around where the ships went to, and I suppose there could be multiple destinations. They may have split apart and probably did go in different areas and have ended up in different parts of the world and grown different power structures within those different places. Some ships were claimed by many, possibly with treasure, and even claims go about the Holy Grail, because the Holy Grail legends are bound up very intricately with the Knights Templar. So some ships were said to escape France and go to Scotland. Now, I think partly when I was reading, which I'm going to mention later, but Andrew Sinclair's one of his books, he's done a few, I think, around looking at his namesakes, the Sinclair family, and around their connections with the Templars, and then with the Masons, which many say the Templars in many forms became the Freemasons. But around the time of this excommunication by the Pope and the King of France, and then around Europe, many other countries would fall into line and say, like, the Templars in their country were also made illegal, or they had to give up their possessions, they had to renounce their membership of the Templars. But there was Robert the Bruce at the time was King of Scotland, and he'd fallen out with, or been excommunicated by the Pope. There was something about some rival of his that he killed in a church or a chapel, basically on sacred ground, and that was given as a reason why he should be excommunicated from the church. So all sort of from that, down from that, he was counter to the rest of Europe and didn't want to obey the Pope and the majority on what they were doing. So there are rumors, although it wasn't official, that he gave a haven for a lot of the Templars. And I'm very interested. I've spoken before on this channel about this connection with both Scotland and the Americas and the descendants of the Templars, and it linked to the group of islands off the top of the Scottish mainland, Orkney. So when I went to St Magnus Cathedral in Kirkwall, it's began being built in the 1100s, so it's centuries old. But I was struck, although I didn't realize at the time until I came back a while, much later, and then I started reading the Sinclair book, and suddenly I was struck as like, oh, I didn't realize there was all this stuff about Orkney and Templars and everything else. But I had been intrigued when I was in the cathedrals. There's a number of tombstones where you have, and although I didn't realize the significance, there are a number of them that have got the skull and crossbones on it. Lots of other symbols as well, which would be intriguing to try and decipher what they might mean. But this one, not a skull and crossbones as such, but still a skeleton. But again, it looks like some sort of alchemical symbol there. I don't know what's going on there. Something about, you've got some strange receptacle, some sort of Holy Grail type thing, and then something's emanating out of it, like some sort of angelic form flying out there. Don't know. But yeah, very intriguing. But yeah, and there's again here quite a rudimentary marking of a skull and crossbone, or well, just one singular bone in that case. But there were a number of these. So as I say, I noted them and took a photograph of them at the time, but it was only sort of later on that I realized that there was a significant Templar connection with the Orkney Islands. So this connection with the Sinclair family, Saint Clair, but Sinclair is like a modern derivative of the name, in England at least. The first Earl of Orkney was Henry the First, St. Clair, who was also Lord of Rosslyn. And you've got this intriguing connection where the same family built and still own the amazing Rosslyn Chapel, which I still haven't got to, but it's definitely on the list. Really keen to go and see it one day. But this amazing chapel, but you can see the size of it. It is more like a cathedral in its scale, and incredible fine craftsmanship throughout the interior and exterior, but so many pagan Norse references, etc., and what you could say were Freemasonry symbols all within the architecture. So this is just south of Edinburgh, and it's been supposedly the centre of Templar influence for centuries, morphing into Freemasonry. And, you know, it just struck me. It seemed to me more than a coincidence that this same prominent family, who had over the years lots of connections with royalty in Scotland particularly, but also because they are descended from Vikings. And so they have this connection with Scandinavia, and Orkney was for a very long time. It was a Viking settlement going back centuries, and I mentioned before one of the things that drew me to going to Orkney, although the main reason was to see the Neolithic sites. But I was also intrigued by, apparently, my surname Froud originated the first time it was recorded anyway as being used. It was in Orkney, and it was the Viking settlement there. So the Sinclair family basically went full on an interesting circle around, because they were Normans as well. And I didn't realize in my ignorance, but I think a lot of people don't, that Normans, that region in France where William the Conqueror came over and was the last official person to conquer England, Normans are, it means Northmen, and they are Vikings. And it was stretching back centuries when they were hi Sarah, thanks for popping in. But yeah, that they were Vikings, and there was this cohort of Vikings who had been laying siege to France for decades, causing absolute mayhem, including sieges of Paris, causing lots of destruction. And eventually, as an attempt just to appease them and stop them causing such destruction, I can't remember off the top of my head when this was, but yeah, they were awarded this land within France that's now known as Normandy. I think it was fairly sparsely populated at the time, but they were, shall we say, indigenous French people that were living there. But basically, it was given over to these Vikings, Norsemen, and they ruled that, if you like, sort of region, that, call it like a principality or whatever, of France. And so Normans are Vikings, Norsemen, and it's just, again, it's unbelievable, really, the huge influence of the Norse. And you've got all this other splinter, if you like, of the Norse that went over to what's now the Slavic regions, and they were known as the Rus, and that's where Russia gets its name. So all around that region as well, you've got descent from the Vikings. And so, yeah, so these descendants of from Scandinavia then populated this area of France, and then came over to England, And then also a number of these people, then the Sinclairs, ended up in Scotland. And then, as I say, then made the first Earls of Orkney, which was then under the Norwegian king. Obviously now it comes under part of Scotland. But sort of, a circle there. But you wonder again if there was knowledge there from the Viking days, but there's obviously, and as I say, there's Norse references within Rosslyn Chapel as well. And this has been talked about. The book Holy Blood, Holy Grail named the Sinclair family as one of those in a bloodline from Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And all this sort of research got used by Dan Brown, who took up to build his literary series, starting with the Da Vinci Code. So the Sinclairs of Rosslyn were hereditary Grand Masters of the crafts and guilds and orders of Scotland, and later of the Masons of Scotland. So for nearly 500 years until the end of the 18th century. So through them, the knowledge of medieval secret societies entered the Masonic movement. Now, this guy, Henry I, the same Earl of Orkney, is said to have gone to America. And this is many years before Columbus. Some researchers, including this modern day author Andrew Sinclair, who I'm presuming has got a family connection at some stage with the Sinclairs who built Rosslyn Chapel and were in Orkney. And he believes there's truth in what's been known as the Zeno narrative, which is an account of two Venetian brothers who ended up in Orkney and were then said to have travelled with Henry to what became North America over a century before Columbus. And this, I believe, is maybe an excerpt from one of the maps that they were supposed to produce. It's an interesting thing, the Zeno narrative. Obviously, the consensus, if you like, the general historical view is that, it's just a made-up story. It's a load of rubbish. And there are certain bits within the narrative which don't ring true. And Andrew Sinclair was saying that he thinks this is because the story got a different voyage, a different time, got transposed in the middle of the Zeno narrative in terms of their journey to what's North America. It was a sort of descendant of these two brothers that wrote or produced the narrative and published it. At the time, it was widely held to be true. But this relative, he said at the start that as a child, that all these papers that had come back from these two brothers, he was as a child and was just playing with them and just didn't know what they were, and actually ripped up a lot of the letters. So then later on, as he grew up, he tried to reassemble them, but many of them were destroyed and they were in messed up order. So there's this uncertainty to the text. But I think it's a fascinating story, and I think there's a lot underlying it. So these two brothers, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, were from a notable family in the state of Venice, which was incredibly powerful at that time. This was around the sort of late 1300s. So it's geographically close to Greece, across the water from Egypt and Turkey. Had great power militarily, financially. Still talked about now. We talk about the Templars, but the black nobility families, as they're referred to, that emerged out of this period of Venice, are still thought by many to wield power across the world. So this Zeno narrative said that first one brother sailed past the Straits of Gibraltar on a personal journey just to see the world and perhaps make some personal fortune. And Sinclair argues himself that this was a bit of a smokescreen, and actually he was on a mission from Venetian authorities and he was trying to establish new markets and tap into plentiful resources that were around the north of Europe, whatever they may be, fishing, skins, whatever it may be. And I don't doubt that there was a strong element of this, because as today, there's all these multiple layers to what the powerful trying to do. And on a lot of the levels, a lot of it is about keeping the hold on resources, finances, and the leverages of power. But I just feel there's more to it. And this meeting with Henry in Orkney, which according to the narrative, it was just an accident. This first brother, in a storm, he got washed, shipwreck, and his ship got washed up on Orkney, one of the islands, and the locals were threatening them and going to do something nasty to him. And then they said, this prince arrived and he could speak Latin and he was very educated. And then he found, he was intrigued by the fact that this brother was a sailor and from Venice, and apparently used him and persuaded him to go on this great voyage to find what's now known as North America. And I'm just wondering, this potential alliance with the Templars or Templar/Norman family and these Phoenician power brokers, but also that they knew that there was something of significance, maybe in Orkney, because I've obviously talked about the power of Orkney, or the incredible that why those incredible Neolithic sites, what they're trying to tap into. I wonder if there was something there that drew both the Templar connection and then the Venetian connection to go there. But then there's these stories of a further promised land, and there was some knowledge that if they carried the journey north, further on to the west, they would get to this new world of the Americas. And I know this has been a large diversion, seemingly, in terms of talking about false flags. But I think it's important because it's a reminder that all our countries are linked in terms of their power structures, as well as in terms of ordinary people. And this is long before, all the current globalization. Globalization was happening centuries ago. But it also shows the importance of marine power and how the nation states and kingdoms were built on piracy in terms of thieving of lives and possessions. And so much around that was connected to the sea. We hear in the modern day about pirates from Somalia, and going back to these golden age of piracy, they were supposed to be, freelancer brigands who were just trying to, just criminals who were out to make as much money as they could. And our DJ's mentioned the Phoenician link. And yes, I think, again, the Phoenicians were a great seafaring race and have been linked with so much in terms of ancient civilizations and connections to where we are now. And yeah, Green Tea, I think there's DNA evidence of these things as well, and connections, apart from other things. So yeah, we hear about, independent pirates, and they're something that should be obviously done away with as a criminal organization. But so much, it's the institutions, the governments, the powerful, who actually engage in piracy more than anyone else, more than any individual criminal. Listening to the excellent Sheep Farm podcast from, it's probably several weeks ago now, because I wrote this a while ago, but they were just talking about the Israeli Defense Force entering flotilla ships trying to breach the blockade of Gaza, 13 or more vessels were seized. And this is another of so many contraventions of international law. And Dom of Sheep Farm said this was like piracy. Now, I don't doubt there were some people that had their own motivations in terms of that flotilla trying to break the blockade. But Israel itself isn't a stranger to attacking foreign ships. Their assault on the USS Liberty in 1967 killed 34 people. But all this struck a chord, especially in that region around Israel. The origins of piracy was centuries ago. As I say, people talk now in the West about the sort of more, if you like, modern piracy history, and talk about this golden age in the 1800s and that around the Caribbean, and we've got these famous pirates like Blackbeard. There's a lot connected with Bristol, close to me, places where they supposed to have hung out and things like that. But it goes back to the ancient Mediterranean, as to the Bronze Age, sure, probably further back than that. But the word piracy is from ancient Greek, and it means attempt. So presumably something like attempting illegal getting something for personal gain. And this turned into the Latin word pirata, and that's where we get the modern English word of pirate. So it was rife around the Mediterranean. The Romans had great problems trying to stifle various pirate states, some of them again around sort of islands around what's now Greece, and some became extremely powerful, just continually raiding all around the coast around the Mediterranean. And again, you think back to the Vikings, and again, much of their power was about their great seafaring capacity, and they would go around and do all these terrible raids, and that was a great source of their power, at least in their early years. And again, as I say, they got huge swathes of Europe was conquered by them, and it was to do with so much of it. They were fierce warriors and all the rest of it, and ruthless, but their ability to with the longboats, they could get obviously coastal areas and into like down rivers as well to get inland. And as I say, they caused untold mayhem in France, and that's what led to them being given the land which is now called Normandy. Alexander the Great, he did a huge effort to try and curb piracy as he was doing his conquests around the Mediterranean. And St. Augustine supposedly recounted an exchange between Alexander and a captured pirate. And I think this is quite a telling quote. Again, whether it actually happened, but the quote itself is, I think, very powerful. The pirate supposedly said to Alexander the Great, "For when that king had asked the man what he meant by keeping hostile possession of the sea, he answered with bold pride, 'What do thou meanest by seizing the whole earth? Because I do it with a petty ship, I am called a robber, whilst thou who dost it with a great fleet art styled emperor.'" And that nicely sums up really how those who rule empires are no better than pirates, and they're worse in many ways because, of course, the scale of it, their plundering and murder is on an industrial giant scale, and far more people are affected. Many times throughout history around the world, governments and royalty have used unofficial privateers to do their dirty work. In many places around South America, many people know Francis Drake is notorious as a pirate. I remember when I went to South America, hearing a lot of that. He's still talked about, I think, or certainly until very recently, he's like a bogeyman figure that's used to like still frighten kids in stories about how he'll fetch them in the night if they're not good and that kind of thing. And yeah, I think absolutely. Green Tea mentions the Vatican, DJ, the modern versions, tech billionaires trying to enslave the world via AI. And absolutely, I think what I'm saying is this is all an extension, and it's the same people or the descendants of the same people. These um, powerful families and organizations, a lot of them secret societies, and absolutely now their modern form of piracy, if you like, is the technology. Absolutely. So yeah, and Francis Drake, he's sort of considered a hero in England and great figure of history. But yeah, he raided countless Spanish ships that were bringing treasures from South America. But of course, the Spanish themselves had plundered that treasure from the civilizations of South America. So it's just one side plundering over another, really, and it's but yeah, it's the whole thing. Oh yeah, uh, one side considers one person a hero for pillaging and raping and killing if it's against the enemy. But yeah, it's all about power struggles, basically. So I feel that this, going back in a circuitous route to this terminology of false flags, is very appropriate, because within the term we can see how those in power have always used deception to enforce their control. So going back to the original use of the term, it was flying a flag of your enemy to pretend that you're one of them so you could get close to do them in, to destroy them. So it's all about deception of symbols to then enable theft and violence. And that, yeah, in different ways, those symbols have now become, it's the extrapolation, the symbols, language, now technology, now AI. Just to look at some false flags that have sort of 20th century onwards. I know most people will probably be aware of a lot of these, of course, but it's just worth still noting them. Another one with a navy element, a sea element, the Gulf of Tonkin, which was given as the pretext for America escalating, joining, or becoming involved in Vietnam. And this, just to keep on the map situation, so the Gulf of Tonkin there in Vietnam. But yeah, this has become a famous 20th century false flag operation, and it's one of these things when people who are rage against conspiracy theorists, and they say, you believe, why would how can big organizations, countries do deceptions? They wouldn't do that would cause a whole war. And it's just, there's the stuff that's happened in the past. It's now been proven, so you can see it's been done, that the proof is there. So why can you not believe that people would do it now? But yeah, so on the Gulf of Tonkin, it was claimed that Vietnam ships had opened fire on an American ship, and this was later confirmed to have been untrue. But the Johnson administration in the US used it to get support from the American people and Congress to begin launching official attacks on North Vietnam, because it was justified as a supposed retaliation. And where have we heard that before in more recent times? It's just a perennial repeat of the same sort of thing. And it hadn't been publicized, of course, that America had already been carrying out covert attacks under the direction of the CIA for quite a while before that. And we know the CIA, other intelligence agencies around the world, it's their entire modus operandi, the operation of false flags in some form. By their very nature, they are deceiving people. They are in espionage. They're laying false stories, false identities, false symbols, if you like. And so if we now, people say that we're living in a post-truth world, well, we know why. People say, oh, conspiracy theorists are spreading misinformation. I think it's been started a long time ago by those in power. They employ people to lie and fabricate. So where we're at is the institutions that are supposed to provide justice, protection, and confidence are undermined. Many in the public have absorbed the propaganda that such things are okay when directed at our enemies. That is part of our government's role, to keep us safe by spying on and subverting those who would otherwise attack us. Again, a number of you will be aware, I'm sure, but Yuri Bezmenov, quite infamous, famous former KGB defector in the 1970s, described methods used by the KGB to slowly destabilize another country, a sort of slow death by 1,000 cuts, which he called ideological subversion. So this is a quote from him here: "The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in the country of your enemy until such time that the perception of reality of your enemy is screwed up to such an extent that he does not perceive you as an enemy. You can take your enemy without a single shot being fired." Yeah, DJ, sorry, I meant to mention that aside, that Jim Morrison's father, who ended up becoming an admiral, but yeah, he was involved in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, something Mark Devlin's talked about, of course, and going back to the weird scenes in the Canyon book. So again, it's levels of deception there. And that ties in, actually, because obviously what Bezmenov talking about, a lot of people have said that the music industry, the film industry, that was all part of this kind of thing of undermining countries from within. Although, you know, he's talking about how, for instance, say here, like the Soviets would maybe do it to countries in the West. But yeah, we see that it's something that the countries themselves are doing to their own people. Yep, you're right, Green Tea. Liz done a great reading of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. So please, people that haven't checked it out, check it out. But yeah, that's there's so much in that book. Again, I think this goes back to exactly what Bezmenov was talking about. So his 4 stages of ideological subversion, which he talked about in his lectures and writings after he defected, he talked about these stages, beginning with demoralization, a long-term process, 15 to 20 years, aimed at reshaping the values and beliefs of a generation. Techniques include propaganda, education reform, and media manipulation to weaken societal unity, which results in a population that becomes cynical, distrustful of institutions, and unable to discern truth. Destabilization, the second stage, focuses on key areas like the economy, foreign relations, and defense, creates division and undermines a nation's structural integrity. Then the third stage, a crisis or crises, a short-lived period where the destabilized society collapses into chaos, often involves violent upheavals or the collapse of governance. Fourth stage, normalization, the imposition of a new ideological order, usually authoritarian, under the guise of restoring stability. Again, this will seem very familiar to us in what's going on now. I mean, you can look at it when you think about covert American, British, other intelligence agencies destabilizing other countries, like the Arab Spring nation, where nations were supposedly spontaneously erupting in popular revolutions, but really they were instigated by security forces from our countries because it suited them, their agenda. Supposedly it was about democracy, but really it was opening up opportunities so our people, not our people, but security forces could come in and then manipulate those countries, the new leaders that came in supposedly to stabilize things with a new regime. But again, it's not just being done by security forces of our countries against other countries. It's also being done within our countries against our own people, against their own people, if you like, because they don't view it like that. Their people are the people in power, and this little small select group, and so the rest of us are the others that need to be manipulated and controlled. And yeah, DJ, maybe the current British lot are working to be the authoritarians, but I think it is basically very much seems like it follows that plan or those stages that Bezmenov talks about in a one form or another. But yeah, green tea, I agree. Bubbles burst with the weird scenes in Canyon. Painful with a lot of those people that were sort of heroes. But I think it is good, like Mark Devlin says, you could still enjoy the music. Just it's important not to regard anyone as being heroes or above, anything else. Just like the music. But yeah, still things are tainted when you think how the level it's been manipulated, and everyone that got behind those bands and the sort of the movements that they inspired. But so much does seem that it's engineered. But it's all part of false flags. As we know, there's been so many of those as well, with different things that are meant to have been terrorist attacks or whatever, and to justify where we are in the world. And I do think, as I mentioned on my first podcast, which you can listen back on, which is on the channel here, about ancient wisdom, new agendas. But I talked then about flags, and I talked about what's happening with the St. George's Cross on the English flag of St. George. And again, it's this sort of subversion of symbols, and it supposedly set up, it's supposed to be a flag that we can get behind, a symbol of national unity and identity. Although I would argue that in itself is used to manipulate, because obviously we know the English establishment, if you want to go back centuries up till the modern day, of course, they've been guilty of manipulating and using people and creating death and destruction. So I'm not going to unite behind the flag, if you like, or that national identity in that sense. But at the same time, the idea, the concept that they've made it now, that just to display the flag of the country you're in is seen as being a criminal act. I mean, that is insanity. That's again the level of deception, and like the whole Orwellian thing of 2 + 2 = 5. It's that the way they can flip symbols to supposedly make it, you're showing the flag of the country, that makes you racist and subversive and possibly someone that could be imprisoned. It's that sort of insanity of subverting symbols, but again, obviously being used very deliberately, I would say, for creating the divisions, creating the demoralizing, damaging people's sense of identity. They set one sort of people up with one kind of identity, one another with a different one, set them against each other, then subvert things. So one identity becomes frowned upon and belittled. People that have that belief get belittled. Just different levels of manipulation, one upon the other. Absolutely, DJ, the Libyan revolution against Gaddafi. Absolutely, it's all about those powerful people with Rothschilds, Mandelson, Clintons, Obama, Cameron, all of these different levels. It was totally about manipulating for the agendas of those in power. But yeah, they've made it now, this St. George's flag, and they've made it into something that is being used to justify the authoritarianism that DJ was talking about. So they're saying, oh no, we've got, it's this dangerous, all these dangerous racists, and there's all this civil unrest now. So we've got to have greater surveillance of our own people because people are causing, and it's the same sort of thing with the whole, what was it, January the 6th, supposed riots and all that sort of thing. So then they brought up in America the status of domestic terrorist. So again, lots of people were put in prison, very similar in different ways to the manipulation that happened after the riots, so-called, that happened after, what was it, the terrible stabbings of the girls. In this country, again, I think it was all engineered so then they could crack down on internet use, so many people being arrested now for things posted on social media, etc. And then, oh no, we need digital ID now. And they're trying to, again, play different sides off, say, oh, we need digital ID to stop illegal immigration, people illegally getting work. So they're trying to play off different sides. Oh, we use that reason, so then that will please those supposedly on the right. That's what they want. It hasn't seemed to work, though. People on both sides seem to not want digital ID still. But I think the idea, okay, people on the right will say, yeah, it's okay, we'll go for it because it will stop illegal immigrants getting work and it will deter people from coming over. And then they're trying to make it appeal to people on the left because it's like, oh, look, we need more restrictions on people and what they post on the internet because there's this rise of right-wing racists, and we need to control those within our borders. So, as David Icke says, problem, reaction, solution, and playing people off against each other to achieve their aims. And sadly, a lot of people are falling into the trap, and it's becoming more and more. I like to say that people are falling for it, but at the same time, I'm still hopeful that a lot of people are also seeing through it. And like I say, the digital ID seems to be something that is uniting people. I hope that people stick with it, though. I'll talk about that a bit more in a little while. But so going back to the false flags, things like the Gulf of Tonkin, often a country has carried out an attack on an ally or even on its own citizens while pretending to be an enemy force to give the pretext for launching a war. But then increasingly, false flags have been an intelligence operation within a country to weaken it from the inside, promoting fear of an external enemy so those in power can introduce greater restrictions on their own population, as well as justifying launching a war. We all know about 9/11, so I won't go into that. There's also 7/7, which Nick Kollerstrom, who's also done a book on false flags. Is it False Flags in Europe? I can't remember. I have got the book gifted to me, but I can't remember the exact title. But yeah, one of his very good books, but he's written very well on 7/7 in this country as well. Again, I think so much there that they were false flags and they were created in some way. And again, people who say, "Oh, this is insanity. How could you believe this?" Just to go from another quite relatively recent, certainly 20th century example, Operation Gladio. Another book I have in my possession, but I haven't actually read yet. But Paul L. Williams wrote about it, but it's been documented elsewhere, and it is in the mainstream. This is all come out now in to a large extent. So this is certainly, it's not conspiracy theory. Again, it's the kind of thing. If you've got some normie, it's like, oh well, this you talk about governments within the West, CIA, etc., destabilizing countries within, people within allied countries and that sort of thing. And green tea, you say, when people are afraid, they're easily led. Absolutely. And this is what all this was about. So Operation Gladio, covert NATO and CIA initiative during the Cold War, involving the establishment of secret stay-behind armies in Europe. So this was a number of countries. Supposedly, they were there to counter potential Soviet invasions and suppress leftist movements. So the Gladio networks were implicated in numerous terrorist attacks across Europe to create a strategy of tension. Just what you're talking about, green tea. When people are afraid, they're easily led. So this was part of this plan, and as I say, this is all CIA, etc. were involved with this to create a strategy of tension, which sought to instill fear and maintain the status quo against the rise of communism. As you say, DJ, obviously what happened with COVID was a primary example. Of course, people still in masks and that sort of thing, still believe in the narrative, even though so much has come out to disprove it in all the years following, apart from when we were actually going through it. But around this Operation Gladio, so this book, I think, is focusing on what happened in Italy. So what was known as Italy's years of lead, Gladio were particularly active, and there was a huge amount of political violence, terrorism, and this Operation Gladio was linked to various attacks, including the Bologna railway station bombing in 1980, which killed 85 people. But they were involved in other countries as well. The stay-behind armies were involved in several coups and political manipulations, such as the 1967 coup in Greece and the 1980 coup in Turkey. So again, it's been well documented since that they were instrumental in overthrowing governments in countries. As I say, it's very much like the Arab Spring, things happen now, Libya, so many examples. And Paul L. Williams talks in his book not only the CIA, but that in Italy that involved the Vatican and the mafia. So you've got state forces acting with and through criminal organizations. So it goes back again when I've been saying about the pirates of old, and there really isn't any difference or barrier between supposedly criminals acting on their own and now very large scale criminal groups like the mafia, and our governments and the secret services and all that, and of course, and they act with each other. So it just again shows the criminal nature of the people that govern us, and just these organizations are all interlinked, and it's us, the people, that are the victims of it all. And I believe these practices are still in evidence now. When I wrote this, it was soon after the attack on a synagogue in Manchester, and that happened just around the whole when the digital ID was supposedly going to start to be coming in here in the UK. It seemed so it's convenient to say the least that there was something else that happened that would give them a justification for bringing in further restrictions, because there's a danger to our safety, and obviously our safety is paramount to them, of course. I mentioned Gaza briefly earlier, and I think again October the 7th that started all that recent horrendous what's been going on there. I think again you've got so many things there that seem to again come into these category of what you could call false flags, caused by or allowed to happen, shall we say, by a major government because it suits their agenda and they want to create further conflict. So there's been a lot put out there about how Israel, or people within Israel, government people, quite high up people, propped up Hamas and provided that because they wanted a more religious enemy to be seen as an antagonist which they could fight against. And was it the PLO that was a more secular leader in Palestine for a period, but they want the Israelis supposedly propped up Hamas to push out the PLO. Some people say, oh look, they backfired. They've ended up with this far more aggressive adversary, but no, it didn't. It didn't backfire. I think that was the plan all along. So I think they wanted, because Hamas are more of like pushed themselves as being like an Islamic organization. So they wanted, I think these mad people within the Israeli government or whatever, they want to instigate a sort of holy war type of thing because that suits their sort of crazy prophecy idea of how things are going to play out. But also many voices within Israel, and I've seen videos, I'm sure a lot of people have, of people at the time that had been in the IDF that found it hard to comprehend how this ultra high-tech Iron Dome that they've got in Israel, that's supposed to be like the most secure, high-tech security coverage, people talked about, that there was a small animal goes by the wall and alarms go off, there's cameras, there's everything, and it would be immediately detected. So the idea, the fact that these Hamas fighters came over with sort of rudimentary devices and that sort of thing, and they were able to get in, and not only were they not noticed, but it took a couple of hours, it took a long time for the IDF, this sort of crack force, to react to them. So I definitely think that and Netanyahu described it as their 9/11, and we know what 9/11 was about. So yeah, it is their version of 9/11, but for the same reasons of that 9/11 was created. It's also come out, and again, this is within Israel themselves. There's been lots of condemnation in different ways of what's been done by the government and the security forces. And the IDF was supposedly given what was said to be a defunct directive, Hannibal directives, where they indiscriminately opened fire and blew up anywhere where hostages were, Israeli hostages, because they didn't want them to be taken captive back into Gaza. I know a number of people were taken, and I'm not defending that in any stretch of the imagination. But it would seem that a large number of the Israeli deaths that happened on October 7th were actually a result of their own government's forces and deception. I suppose what's been termed, the kind of thing that's been termed friendly fire in the past. So, and you look at that term, Hannibal directive. So I guess it's a reference to Hannibal Lecter, probably, the cannibal eating your own, destroying your own. So many of the deaths, I think officially in Israel, have been attributed that were actually caused by the IDF themselves. And then, of course, that then becomes used as justification for incredible, terrible slaughter of thousands of Palestinian children and women, as well as men. So the skull and crossbones, going back to that, where we came in. That would be an appropriate flag for the New World Order. The global government that's been imposed on us is a death cult, as been said by others, and it's always been built on the bones of the innocent. The false flag is sadly alive and well and continuing the oppression of the many by the few. And in America, too, the recent shooting of Charlie Kirk and the surrounding controversies and tensions. Similarly, my wife's calling me antiseptic. I can't imagine what she's talking about there. So, yeah, I think there's so much this Charlie Kirk thing. Again, in some respects, is a false flag. I'm not saying he didn't die. He hasn't been shot. I keep all options open. But certainly things aren't right. Things are not the official narrative. Again, there's manipulation. And I think, again, it's being caused to create tensions, to create fears, hopefully to spark people off against each other, create some sort. Have you seen? I think there've been multiple people have referred to how there was multiple references in like news bulletins, discussion programs to civil war. Oh, there could be a civil war. Or I think there's going to be a civil war, and then some people in this country started saying it as well. And it's like, again, putting it out there, putting it in the psyche, trying to set people off, trying to set things in motion to cause this conflict. Now, there is an interesting element within the Charlie Kirk, and again, definitely seems to be something that's planned, because this trend of there being mass shootings that were done by people that identify as transgender, and that seems to have been a sort of a recent thread going through, quite a new thing. But then, and in the case of the Charlie Kirk alleged killer, I would rather doubt that he was the one. But Tyler Robinson, he isn't trans, but his lover is. So there's still a connection there. And coincidentally, Kirk's last words before he's apparently shot are talking about the number of shootings carried out by trans people. So this is just an article about another one of those, not the Kirk one, obviously. And this pointed out, actually, I didn't realize when I plucked this from the internet, but it's got the Ukraine and the American flag at the top of it, just to keep in with the flag theme, which is quite interesting. And I just noticed there we've got a yellow border there around a crying child. And well, you know me, I've written a lot of stuff about lost children and often how that is connected, whether it's with historical, fictional narratives, but also I think it's so often used as the ultimate manipulation. If something, like I said about was it Southall, where those poor girls were stabbed to start off the riots, which then led to clamp down on right-wing extremism in this country. So much of it, terribly, they use children, and it's the biggest manipulation, because it's innocent children. It's the hardest hitting thing, and it's the thing that's most likely to get fear and anxiety in the general population, and to make them also obviously react viscerally, angrily at the destruction of a child's life. And we know, sadly, that the people in power are actually most guilty of that. But yeah, they use that, and again, it's the ultimate tool to create destruction, create fear and manipulation. But the use of oh, my wife, she's not here. My wife's not here. It's just a mirage in front of my eyes. She's doing artistic things. There may be artistic things afoot on the channel later. No, there won't be. I didn't say that. But anyway, but the transgender thing itself, I know this has been spoken out by a lot of people, but I think it's another manipulation, which again I think is damaging children apart from adults, but particularly when it's targeted children. I'm struck by that whole thing of David Tennant, the old Doctor Who actor, having a T-shirt "Leave the kids alone," and it's supposed to be for trans rights. But I would say, yeah, leave the kids alone, but more not for destroying their lives when they're not old enough to make a valid opinion themselves, and they're being manipulated into making a certain choice. So to me, the whole thing here again is more further manipulation. It's obviously disrupting the reproduction of humanity, because transsexual people can't have children in the natural way. And that's something that a lot of young people tragically found out, which they weren't made aware of when they were persuaded to take life-changing surgery or chemicals, that puberty blockers, drugs, etc., that would stop them developing naturally into men or women. And it could ever be fully reversed. So people will never be able to father or mother children. And it's terribly sad when you hear people talk about how they've changed their minds after being coerced into taking medication or surgery as teenagers when they're still children, because of policies here in other countries which have just had this thing of like encouraging and when kids who are obviously confused and going through things, doubts about their sexuality. So yeah, these individuals are left with terrible, life-changing wounds, physical, mental. Again, this might be something to go into more in another time, but I think it fits into this death cult idea I mentioned earlier, where dissecting the body is a fetishistic denial of what's natural to enable transition to a world where reproduction is a chemical robotic system governed by the state and its corporate adjuncts. It's the ultimate denial of the celebration of fertility by our Neolithic ancestors, going back to the real origins of what that was all about. It was about the power of the sun and the earth, but it was also about the union of the male and the female, divine feminine, divine masculine, but also in a very material sense, it was about fertility and the encouragement of propagation of the species, continuing life on the cycle. Hi, Mari. Good to see you. Thank you. Good to see you. Good luck with the house cleaning. So I think there's many levels to this trans shooters. And I think with a lot of the shootings over the years, many are false flags, which doesn't mean that people weren't sadly, tragically killed, because I think in most cases they were. But I think that the people, they were either just used as a patsy and it was someone else who did the killing, or so often people, when this goes into those shooters that are transsexual, so many are on some sort of medication, and there's all these, obviously you've got antidepressant drugs as well, mental health problems, and the vast amount of that in general is just a plague on our society, which again we know has been another thing that's been created by these institutions, and it's another part of those stages of demoralizing, damaging, destroying societies from within. And people have lost their purpose, their understanding of their function as a human being. So they're driven to drugs, legal or illegal, and it's a further numbing of their personality, their being, and then they're more open to manipulation. So many people now are the hollow men of T.S. Eliot's poem. And these people are perfect subjects for the mind control practices. and we know that our countries have been using it for decades, and we can go back again to the weird scenes inside the canyon and all that. Obviously, so much around that time, around the sort of acid and that promulgation of that in the counterculture there. But another really excellent book about that time, Chaos, the book about Charles Manson and all that. And I know he wasn't I can't remember the author's name of Chaos, but he wasn't the first. I know that's crazy conspiracy theorists of people have been talking about the connections between Manson and like CIA, MK Ultra, that kind of thing for some time. But yeah, the guy who wrote Chaos, was quite if you like, a normie. I think he was sort of more of a film journalist, and it just sort of snowballed. He became obsessed with the whole Manson thing, and it took over like sort of 20 odd years of his life. But yeah, there's definitely, I think, the definite connections with Manson and all these things, the MK Ultra programs, or those similar programs, people who are doing those. And there was, institution in like San Francisco at the start of the burgeoning of all this psychedelic movement, people being used as sort of guinea pigs. And again, I think it was an extension of these MK Ultra to put people out into the society. And yeah, in using the entertainment industry as promulgating a lot of these sort of, I suppose, MK Ultra, but making it into a nationwide, worldwide thing where you've got disorientation of the senses and then enabling brainwashing. And it's something that it's enabling the brainwashing of entire populations. And that's we've seen a progression to where we are now. Going back to the Kirk shooting, got several other people arrested for the shooting before Tyler Robinson, including a man who loudly proclaimed he was a killer immediately after the shots were fired. So he's a convenient diversion. And then this man was then, I believe, found to have child pornography on his phone. So then you got all these references again to the abuse of children. And again, Israel's been talked about being implicated. Candace Owens, there's these texts from Kirk supposedly that have been publicized about how he was rejecting Israel, talking about the genocide in Gaza, and he was fearing the repercussions about what that would mean for him, because he'd previously had big donors who were Israel supporters, which is like most of American Congress, media, corporations. But I would still review with skepticism. I'm not 100% going, so Candace Owens is all good and she's not being manipulated either. It's all part of maybe a big game. And I know as well that might be part of an agenda for how making these things public at this time. Adam Green, another person that we listen to, No More News, amongst others, he talked about how these biblical prophecies, which some of these mad rabbis that you hear clips of talking about how the destruction of the rest of the world, Gog and Magog, and that's going to then, when everyone else has destroyed themselves, they're going to take over and the sort of promised land, if you like. And these biblical prophecies that say at the beginning of the end times, all nations will turn against Israel. So again, with like a lot of these prophecies, it's just really maybe that people are enacting what was written and they're making it happen. So they want the chaos and destruction to then provide them with the opportunity to assume the control of the world that they feel is their right. So you got the recent walkouts in the UN when Netanyahu spoke, and then the UN's declaration that Israel has been guilty of genocide. So this provides these fanatics, I would say, within the Israeli government, Netanyahu, and as I say, some mad rabbi people that are quite prominent as well, whether in Israel or other countries, seemingly wanting to fuel this. And it provides them with the excuse to say the world is against them. So, to conclude, so much in our world is false. The false flag is the perfect symbol because it's just a negative, a pretense, a deception, a lie to enable destruction and manipulation. So that was basically my talk, with a few of extra little bits. So I don't thank you for people for commenting in the chat. If anyone's got any other things that they want to throw out there about what I've talked about, but it's I'm trying to it's quite difficult keeping on top of it, and what I'm like with the live streams, although I did used to, obviously in the past last year, do a live stream every week, but I'm trying now to keep going with the podcast for ClearAirFM. But the good thing is that maybe a week or two's delay, I can then do it as a live stream or put it out there, at least on our channel, for people to listen to here, because I can only do get a podcast up every 1 or 2 weeks onto the ClearAirFM. So obviously there's other people on there, and so nicely I'm on the schedule there as being between 4 and 5, but sometimes there's other people in that slot because there's other guest contributors, if you like. But so I'll keep green tea. In answer to your question, I will either do what we did for the first one, where the audio recording will just put up maybe as a premiere, so I can be in the chat and talk about it if people want to, or I'll do it again and just read it out again, and we can put some images to it and do it as a live stream like this. So, but I will keep putting them up there on this channel because it's a bit easier for people to see them, maybe, in a way. But yeah, we'll keep going on it. But yeah, it's a great thing to be part of, because I think the Light newspaper, for those in this country, I'm sure most of you would have had it. My stepson kindly got me a subscription of it, so I've been getting them in the post. Although it's free if you get it given out. People often give it out on sort of streets and that sort of thing, but you can subscribe and get sending it in the post. So obviously you're paying some money, but that's supporting them. So, but yeah, it's a great newspaper, a great thing that's got some great articles in it, and it's very much alternative views and looking at the real thing underlying society and politics and everything else. So some great articles in there. So as I say, the person who started that, Darren, is behind this channel as well. So it's really great to be part of. And they've got podcasts on there from James Corbett, and they're replaying old podcasts by the legendary Bill Cooper, the American, one of the original conspiracy theorists, and also Mark Devlin is on there, and a number of other people. So do give it a check out, ClearAirFM online. So yeah, so we'll keep it on YouTube, and also, as I say, go and check out ClearAirFM. If I'm not on, then someone else interesting will be. But yeah, Bill Cooper's Mystery Babylon. Good listen, DJ says. Okay, well, I'll have to check that out. I must say, I have only heard bits of him. Obviously, Bill Cooper was sort of pre-internet, so I think he used to like put videos out, like real old school. But certainly, I think a precursor for many to, long before the likes of David Icke even, and Alex Jones and whoever, And I believe I read something like he said, "Oh, if you're going to stop me to the authorities, you're going to have to shoot me on my doorstep," and they did. I believe I'm right in saying, I think supposedly the excuse was something to do with firearms, and they did a raid on his premises, and he came out with a gun supposedly, so they shot him. I don't know. I'm just doing it off the top of my head now, but yeah, someone that is it Beyond the Pale Horse or something like that. The book of that he did. But yeah, I was also gonna just run through, if, as I say, people feel free to put some things out in the chat, just to have if people want to ask any questions, or just generally how things are, or your views on the world. I was just going to mention a few things that we've been doing all these weeks when we've been neglecting you. We've been to a few conferences. I'm not going to do a big extensive run through of all of them, and because for time, and obviously we've been to quite a lot, but we went to the Mysterious Universe Conference, which is run by Maria Wheatley, the fantastic Maria Wheatley, who I've mentioned previously when I did a tour with her around the Templar churches around Avebury. And she did a conference in a village just outside Avebury. She does one every year called Mysterious Universe. Excellent speakers, including Maria herself. Also, as part of that, there was a Mary Magdalene Church, which is in that same village, which is called Winterbourne. Winterbourne Monkton. So literally just on the edge of Avebury. And we went to the church there, and similar to those, it's another Templar church, so similar to the ones that we went to on the tour, which I've got a live stream about. It had these energy spots around where the altar is, and we went around there and stood on the spots. I felt a little bit, I would say, although I must admit I can't trust myself, and whether it was just psychological, because I was told that those were energy spots. Certainly Liz and other people there could feel it very strongly, so I think it's probably partly the lack of sensitivity on my part to those energies, but I still felt something. I definitely think that there is something within it, so that was really fascinating. But the talks were excellent. There was Nana Kasha, who talked about Mayan symbology, Mayan pyramids around there. She's an American lady, but lives in Mexico, and she was talking about a number of Mayan sites and the symbolism of those. So that was really powerful, and it was a good reminder for me. My sort of travels when I went to South America and Mexico, and had it was just mind blowing, the sites there, without knowing too much about the history, especially at that time when I was just backpacking in my much younger years. But just blown away by the sheer scale and the intricacy and the knowledge to these incredible sites. So it was very good to hear more. There was David Furlong, who was talking about ancient Egypt. Someone who's been an expert talking about Egypt for many years. As I say, this is just a run through. And then Alona Woods, who we became friends with. It was great to meet you, Alona, if you're watching. She was talking about her book around very good talk about being grounded in nature and just connecting more back to nature, And a title of their talk, Grounded in Nature, Exploring the Magic and Healing Power of Earth's Resources. And she was talking about talking about natural remedies, spiritual practices, also astrological guidance. I know her latest book, she talks about the tarot as well. So her book is The Road to Sovereignty. The keys to your freedom are always within. And I think that was a powerful message, which we definitely resonated with. So much now is about AI, and this is about going within, tapping into those old knowledges, ancient wisdom, myths and legends, and using it as a self-developmental tool, and just to sort of get back more to the garden, I suppose, to use a phrase. And then Maria herself was talking about ancient America, green tea. She's done a number of trips abroad because she's a master dowser, following in her father's footsteps. And apart from being an expert on the stone circle or megalithic sites around where we are now, here in the West Country and UK as a whole, she's gone to abroad. She does a trip to Egypt as well. But yeah, she was talking about America's Stonehenge. I don't know if you're familiar with it, green tea in New Hampshire. And this was numerous stone chambers, and there's a secret oracle room. So a speaker's voice can be heard some distance away. So like it's rising from the stone. And there's got these serpentine walls, which is very interesting because reading Andrew Collins' book, which I talked about Karahan Tepe particularly, but those sites in Turkey, wouldn't be one of my live streams talking about Andrew Collins and Turkey, would it? But again, that was very much snake serpent symbolism, and a lot of that was in the these sort of interlinking parts of the passage, or sort of passages or tunnels or joining parts to different enclosures. And again, it was sort of that serpentine, and a lot of the enclosures themselves like sort of snakehead shaped. It's something that it's very much a connecting symbol, mythologies around serpents, and in the construction of so much megalithic sites. So yeah, that was a place that I'm not really aware of. So that was very interesting. And so yeah, just we've been also to there was a conference by the Knights, Peter Knight and Stone Seeker Tours. That was just outside Glastonbury. Lots of interesting speakers there. Graham Phillips talking about this idea. He talked a lot about Orkney actually, but he was talking about the theory of what's known as Doggerland, which is an area, now it's sort of around the North Sea, sort of around between the I guess sort of the north of the British Isles and the north of Europe. But in the past, centuries ago, when the sea levels were lower, it was a landmass. It was joining what's now the British Isles with what's now the European continent. And I think Graham was giving the theory that this was actually the basis of Atlantis. This was Atlantis, or this was the basis of the legends of Atlantis. And that then when you have like Orkney and the north of Scotland now, so that's what was Atlantis or whatever on this landmass, when it got submerged under the water, then the people from there, either they they migrated, or the survivors ended up in what's now these islands, or maybe they were there anyway, but then just when the rest of it got submerged, that was just, they were left there. But that's interesting to tie in with what I've been talking about just now, when I was talking about how these Sinclairs ended up there, and their connection with the Templars, and then these sailors with connections with the powerful families in Venice, and somehow they just well, I say accidentally, but supposedly accidentally, in terms of the Zeno brothers anyway, from Venice, ended up accidentally in the Orkney Islands. But I was saying then, maybe that there was, they knew that there was some power source there, or there was some hidden knowledge there, or that they at least had rumors, or that this, maybe they'd heard that this was where Atlantis used to be. Because I did think, actually, I can't remember if I read it out exactly as it was read there, but this narrative talked about, like, the first brother wanting to seek his fortune and or discover the world. So he sailed past Gibraltar, and that's made me think, actually, then of because there's that bit within Plato when he talks about being told about Atlantis by this Egyptian wise person, and it's supposed to be past the Pillars of Hercules, and that's supposed to be Gibraltar. So it did interest this idea, so going beyond Gibraltar, and obviously that's round, but they ended up sailing round to Britain, and they ended up in the Orkney Islands. So I don't know, maybe it wouldn't surprise me if there was something that led them to think that this was where there were sources of ancient knowledge, and they were trying to tap into that. And I know green tea meant you familiar with Laird Scranton, and you told me about him before, and I've now since read his book, or one of his books, talking about the Orkney Islands, and he's very much he believes that they were this ancient civilization. Again, the book I read, he thinks they maybe were based in the Faroe Islands, but yeah, were like teaching people in the Orkney Islands, and this was a descent of knowledge. People was then passed down into what Egypt, ancient Egypt, and the Dogon tribe in North Africa. But he saw this as coming down from around these islands around the Orkney. So maybe that's an alternative, but again, a theory that there was a ancient civilization, or a group of people, whatever they were, whether they were from an ancient human civilization with greater knowledge, or obviously some people would say it was extraterrestrial and they were visitors from somewhere else, and they passed on these knowledge to people. But there does seem something about that region. So, and the Faroe Islands are even just a bit further north from the Orkney Islands. So again, and when this passage of this supposed trip by Henry I with the Zeno brothers, and when they went up, so first sort of north past the Faroe Islands, and then they were going sort of around Greenland, and then around to what's now North America. And of course, as I said before, the Sinclairs were basically Viking descent, Viking, Norse, and of course, well, I say of course, again, I think some people do contest it again, but the Norse were also supposedly did discover North America centuries before Columbus. So again, it would be again connected. It wouldn't. To me, it doesn't seem like such a stretch, because I suppose a lot of people from when we think of like, oh, Britain to America now, and we think about going across the center of the Atlantic, the widest point, if you like, but going across at that top part of the world, there there's quite a lot of land masses, and it's sort of you can, I say hop, it's still a massive journey, and especially in more primitive kinds of vessels, of course, but you could like go from one island or landmass to another to get across to what's now sort of around the east coast of Canada and that top part of North America. So you're not doing the great expanse of sea for hundreds and hundreds of miles as you would going through across the heart of the Atlantic. But anyway, so yeah. But yeah, again, many more interesting talk. Peter Knight's talk, very interesting as well, around the is it Alton Barnes, where there's a Neolithic figure, like a chalk man, and he had a lot of interesting ideas about the symbology of that and the connections there with sort of solstices and constellations and that sort of thing. Mysterious Earth Conference, not to be confused with the Mysterious Universe Conference of Maria Wheatley. So the Mysterious Earth is run by the wonderful Neil MacDonald, fantastic Neil MacDonald, and that was in Lytham St Anne's, in just near Blackpool in the northwest of England. But a nice part of the world by the sea, though it was cold and very windy, but it was beautiful. But a fantastic conference in a hotel there, run by Neil, really great. He's Neil MacDonald, an expert a number of you will be familiar with in the Western mystery wisdom tradition. He's put together now an online course, which Liz and I have started to go through, about this, using this knowledge, a lot of it around the tarot, but all other ancient wisdom, and using it as ways that people can develop themselves. And he showed a film at the start of the conference that was looking at showing, he was looking at various different he's very interesting around in the south of France, which a region he does a lot of tours, and it's very fascinating. I mentioned before about Dan Brown and this whole thing about the possibility of the Jesus and Mary Magdalene line, but there is so much. I talked a little bit before about the south of France, the legends that Mary Magdalene possibly, and Mary, mother of Jesus, and others, which came across after Jesus' death and ended up in the south of France. And then you've got these things around the cult of the Black Madonnas. But he was talking about in his film, the idea of Rennes the Chateau, and the idea that there was hidden knowledge there. He was talking about various people that seem to have connections with ancient wisdom and how this had led to great wealth or power for them. And he was saying that in a way that's what his course is about, not to say necessarily they're going to be powerful rulers of the world, but not in that sense, but in terms of a self-development, so you get the best for yourself in terms of a realization of your greatest self, if you like. And that's really what the ancient wisdom, great work, a lot of it is about. And he reference to ancient Atlanteans, King Solomon, the Knights Templar again, so Rennes le Chateau. The Nazis, of course, I talked about again on a previous live stream. They're interested in esoteric knowledge. He mentioned within the film this, if you like, this energy source that is all about the ancient wisdom, about tapping into. That's neutral. It's just a power source. It's energy. So it can be used for good or for bad. It's not in itself good or evil force. It's just some sort of powerful thing that you can tap into. But if you can tap into to develop yourself, and it's the kind of thing that, it's important, I think, that obviously secret societies, those in power, and talked about the Knights Templar and others having this wielding power and being behind so much potentially in what's happening in the world now. And if us as individuals, the so-called ordinary people, can get access, tap into that kind of knowledge, they can use that. We can use that to, well, I say not fight back, not in a physical sense, but in terms of making ourselves more powerful and enlightened, for want of a better word. And the more people that have that strength, we can withstand what they throw at us, and then we can develop our own ways of being, which is independent of what they're trying to inflict on us. Yeah, Green Tea, we have been busy. We had stalls, not at Maria's conference, but we did at Neil's at Mysterious Earth. So it was great to get Liz's stuff out there. And I also sold a couple of my books. So Silent Sigils, available on lulu.com. So yeah, very good. Met great people. Neil, of course, himself. And
Cardiff.
So it was great to get Liz's stuff out there. Yeah. Liz just said to me, Cardiff Symposium, as in other conferences we've been to. Surely I've talked to you before since the symposium. Blimey, that was in July. Oh God. Well, so much has happened. I can't fit it all in, but we have been doing a lot, which is why we've been neglecting you. Apart from me trying to write podcasts, Liz having a stall at lots of markets at the weekend, another stall in Glastonbury tomorrow. So it's a regular thing, but yeah, Green Tea, Liz is getting her work out there, which is really great, and doing better and better and better with the work coming out there. So I know often she's putting pictures out there of stalls and things, and also you can check out Crafty Knowledge's website. Send her an email if there's anything that you would be interested in commissioning or ordering or anything like that, if you can't physically come and find us in any of the stalls. So yeah, the Mysterious Earth, Sarah Mondaini, who popped in the chat. I don't know if you're still around, Sarah, but she did an amazing talk. Again, looking at this called Wisdom Beyond the Veil, looking at this ancient esoteric wisdom, the Hermetic wisdom, a lot of the stuff that, as I say, that Neil was teaching in his course, and Sarah did a really great talk, sort of setting out the background of that wisdom, that school of knowledge, if you like, and how it can be something that helps us all. So a really great talk, and Sarah was a great compare for the speakers that came later. And yeah, Sarah's got a great channel herself, and she's getting quite arty, getting back to her arty self. I don't know if there may be a connection coming up with our great, wonderful Liz, but we have to watch this space. They're tantalizing us, but maybe there might be things in the pipeline. Maybe. I can't say anymore. I probably said too much. I'll probably be killed after this. But anyway, it was a fantastic talk by Sarah. Really enjoyed it, and it was great having her company. DJ talks about the upcoming comet asteroid thing. So this is the 3i Atlas. I must admit, I've not been keeping full attention on it, but I've been dipping out. I was very interested. I know I mentioned him already, and I mentioned him a lot, but Andrew Collins, if you have a look on his YouTube channel, and it's probably on his website as well. There's probably something on there. He did an interesting article suggesting that 3i Atlas might be some sort of plasma being, like as I was talking about Robert Temple's book, on a previous live stream. But plasma does seem to me like a fascinating area where it seems so much that we talk about as paranormal, and possibly a lot of things that are attributed to UFOs, extraterrestrials, that so much of that is around plasma entities, plasma that is sentient in some way. And I actually messaged Andrew talking about that, and he did say, "Oh, well, I've actually written quite a few years ago about plasma myself." I can't remember exactly what his book was called, but I'm going to have to get it at some point. But I will just have a look for that. But yeah, I think that that's an interesting third possibility. I agree, DJ. I think plasma has consciousness, and I think that's an interesting third possibility. So it does seem what I have read, that it's not an ordinary comet. Sorry, the way it's maneuvering, that kind of similar to obviously Oumuamua or whatever it was called, the previous one, where it's sort of suddenly changing direction and behaving in ways that are, just doesn't seem like it could just be an inanimate comet just flying through space. It doesn't seem to add up with the way that it's moving about. So, but obviously a number of people are surmising that it's some sort of interstellar craft, and maybe that will be the case. But I quite like the idea. It seems to have a lot of resonance with me as well, that it could be this kind of plasma. I'm just checking. Sorry, just Light Quest. That was apparently Andrew Collins' book that he wrote some years ago, but it was again around the idea of plasma. But I know Andrew was talking in his article. There's this thing where the 3I Atlas, there was an ejection, a big mass ejection from the sun, but it was sort of like this 3I Atlas sort of seemed to go towards it, and it was as if almost it was connecting with the sun, or it was drawing energy, like this ejection from the sun. So going along that, the what's coming from the sun, obviously that's plasma, and it's like it was refueling or somehow, or it was connecting in some way with the sun. I mean, I think Rupert Sheldrake talking about the sun having consciousness, and this idea again I mentioned before of this supermassive black hole, Sagittarius A, that's in the center of the galaxy, and that could be God. That is because that is the origin of everything within our galaxy. That's where all the planets, the solar system, the stars, they all start from there, and it blasts out the energy, the plasma, the things that form into the material and the stars that we all come from. So in a very real scientific sense, that is the origin of life, where it all comes from. But again, the idea that it has consciousness, and when you think, if that is the case, if plasma can have consciousness, and you look at something like the sun and the enormity of that, if there's a consciousness there, and then you go to something that was at the origin of the galaxy and is it's something like it's like something like 3 or 4 million times the size of our sun. I mean, it's just impossible to comprehend this Sagittarius A. So So, but yes, I very much recommend that book by Temple. Is it Science of Heaven, something like that? As I say, I did a live stream on it some time ago, but yeah, it's a brilliant book, and I always I love it when someone who is clearly a very knowledgeable scientist like Temple, but then he's also fascinated by ancient science, and he's done a lot of books and research around ancient Egypt, etc. But yeah, he's a hardcore scientist, and he talks within his book. It's all about hardcore science, and referring to research by many renowned scientists, and he's someone that has the knowledge that he can talk about it and know what it's going on about, rather than someone like me that's very just a layperson. But then he's also got a belief or a feeling that there's a spiritual side to the world, for want of a better word, a religious sense to the world. But to him, this idea of plasma and consciousness, it very much backs up a lot of the spiritual theories of the world, and it's, if you like, a scientific proof basis for so much of what we term as paranormal or spiritual. So I think it's really where it's at, if you like, in what's going on. I just realised I've got a bloody transgender killer. I've been chatting away with a transgender killer on the bloody screen. Part of it. I'm sorry, I'll remove it now, but then you just got me in full screen, which is maybe not much better, but yeah, I haven't actually read any of Temple's other books around, ancient science and that sort of thing, but yeah, it's something I'd like to do. I know he's spoken at Megalithomania, or at least Origins Conference, but yeah, the conferences with Hugh and Andrew. Yeah, really fascinating. So yeah, been doing so many great talks. Mab, hello mate. Green Team, Maura Bellino has a new book out, Skies of Fire. Apparently got together with Van Daniken and through Von Daniken. My lovely wife keeps shouting Cardiff to me. I'll go on to Cardiff in a sec. So Von Daniken, Old Notes and Travels. No, I haven't. I did see. I've subscribed to his YouTube channel. I must admit, I don't click onto it. A lot of it's in Italian, though there'll be translations. But I did see a picture of him with Von Daniken, so I knew there was some sort of collaboration. That would be fascinating to read. I would be very interested in that. So thanks, Green Tea. It's another interesting reference, all these ideas of the ancient aliens thing, and I do think there's a lot in there. But again, there's so many different layers. I'm fascinated by reading all of these things, things to do with plasma, things to do with possibilities of coming from other worlds. But these things, might be connected, or they might be different layers of different influences on our little terrestrial life, as they were. But yeah, my lovely wife keeps shouting about Cardiff because there was sort of the Welsh occult group society, not sure how they term themselves, but a lovely lady, Sian, organises Earth, Sea and Sky conference that was in Cardiff, in a beautiful hotel in Cardiff, and Liz had a stall there, and there were lots of fascinating speakers around the occult, a lot of sort of witchcraft, old mythology, witchcraft practices, and there was a physical conference in Cardiff which we went to, and as I say, Liz had a stall, and then there was a virtual conference the following Saturday with another set of speakers, and it was very good. In between the two, on the evenings in between, they offered slots for other people to do online talks, and I did one. So there's been a bit of a delay, unfortunately, in it getting put out. It is going to be posted so that people can. Ashana's been putting them out there on Facebook, links to the talks, so that my talk will be available soon. So I will be promoting it, and if I can somehow get it on the channel, if not, I might possibly redo it. But anyway, hopefully I can get it broadcast what I broadcast for the Welsh Occult Conference. So somewhere or another there will be the possibility to see that talk again. So I sort of did it live a couple of weeks ago, but yeah, it will be possible to see again. And I'm looking at the connection, I think, between, well, stone circles, Neolithic, megalithic sites, and I'm thinking that is the origin of language there, although it predates by a few thousand years, maybe. But I think in terms of the symbolism and getting back to the magic within words, so where I've been talking here about flags and symbols being subverted, I think I'm interested by the ideography that M.B. Jackson talked about in his books, where the origins of language, it was magic writing. It was the symbols and sigils, signs that became written language. Their original construction was around magic. It was about connecting with the earth, the sky, the cosmos, and human life. And it was about, I suppose, affecting those things, connecting with those things, but using it, like I talked about, the idea of using esoteric wisdom. It all stems from there. This idea of symbols, obviously that's what they went with tarot in terms of visual symbols, and ways that can connect with the psyche and enable people to have a connection with the earth, where they can move things, where they can alter how life is and mold reality, if you like. But I think in the essence, what I'm trying to get at, it fascinated me because I've talked before how, and I have done little short videos actually that are on the channel about some of that idea of videography, but it's fascinating to me because I did this when I was doing my academic stuff, and we had all this sort of theoretical stuff around language and how it affects society, and it certainly does, but how it's like being like an empty system. There's no intrinsic meaning to words. They're just, it's just been designated in a language that a door means a door, but there's no intrinsic connection between things and the words that name them. But this idea of the very origin of language is that they were intrinsically connected with the physical world and the things that they name, and the cosmos and the sun and the stars, etc. So I think that's something that's fascinating. So that's where I got into the talk. So yeah, green tea. I hope there'll be more public speaking. It's something that I'm going to get to, definitely. So this was a good getting stuff out there on a virtual talk. But yeah, I'll get up on a stage soon, I'm sure. But I will let you know. I think I've missed a couple of things in the chat. I have done academic talks. This is true, in a different life, as it were. But yeah, I've done it, and I'll do it again. But in our more sort of esoteric conferences, maybe where we can, bring in the sort of new things that I've been researching. So Bellino now has auto translate working, so we don't have to read subtitles, can listen in. Oh, okay, brilliant. Thanks, Green Tea. I will have to do it then. Dorling Kindersley book on occult symbolism. Oh, I don't know about that. DJ? Mainstream publishers trying to cash in? Well, I think there is a lot of interest in that. Symbols of the occult. So yeah, I think there is people are becoming interested in it, and I think there's a number of people maybe see it as a way of breaking out of the mainstream. But I think there is a danger as well that some of these sort of magic, some of these can be used for agenda items as well. You know, they infiltrate everything, don't they? Signs and symbols. Yeah, well, I think that is what it's about. And as I say, well, my thing was always about language because I used to like study literature at university, and that's what. But you know, even then, when I did my book on the lost child, it was around language. But I did even then talk about there being a deeper element to it all, if you like, for want of a better word, metaphysical. This ground of all there is, which I believe language sort of the gaps in the words, which I connected with this idea of the lost child. It reveals a space where our physical reality opens up and we see, or we can get affected by what is actually below that in a spiritual, deeper sense. But anyway, DJ, he did a lot of semiotics at uni, so you're in the same boat as me, really. So I think it's interesting to get these different ideas. But yeah, very much it's about signs and symbols, and whether that's magic going back several hundred years, stuff that's on cave paintings and Neolithic sites, up to codes and things like that are in AI. It's all just a continuum, really, and it's like the energy. It can be used for good or bad. So we need to try and use it for good, and use it for our own good and develop. But I think I might be out of my own words for today. But it's been great to see you again, and thank you for joining me in the chat. And hopefully, many more people listening back in the weeks to come. But yeah, I'll try and do my best to get more up. As I say, because I'm trying to do the podcasts for ClearAirFM, I can put them up here or adapt them. So one way or another, I will try and keep more contact with my lovely friends as the weeks go on, and keep you updated about new developments and new things we're doing. So hope you all have a great week ahead, my friends. Check out ClearAirFM. And those who are new to the channel, check out some of my older videos when I go through a lot of the subjects on previous live streams. And yeah, lovely to see you back. Thanks, Green Tea. Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, DJ. Have a good one, everyone. I just wanted to shout out to some people we saw at the Mysterious Earth Conference. Morag and Ian, you watch the channel, so it's great to meet you in person. I think Julia, was it Julia? Sorry, my mind's going old age syndrome or whatever. It was great to meet people, new people, and it's so lovely when met people I've never met before, and they say, "Oh yeah, we've watched your channel." That means so much. That's just such a great feeling. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks all for joining us, and yeah, see you, Pete. See you everyone soon. Look after yourselves. Bye all. Much love.